Susie Evans details emotional egg freezing. Susie Evans was a well-known member of Clayton Echard's season of The Bachelor. While they had a dynamic relationship, things changed, and they didn't wind up together. However, now, she's thinking about the future, and part of that future includes freezing her eggs. She's explaining why this was an incredibly emotional experience for her. Keep reading to learn what she said. Susie Evans on The Bachelor. Bachelor Nation fans will remember Susie Evans well for her passionate relationship with Clayton. While things went really well for most of the season, the couple hit some turmoil in fantasy suites, which is quite common for the show. Susie made it clear she would be uncomfortable if Clayton had been intimate with any of her fellow castmates. However, at that point, he was already 2 fantasy suites deep, both of which had gotten physical. After that, Susie went home. However, that didn't keep her away from Clayton. The 2 stars ended up getting back together until 2022, when they called it quits for good. Of course, time continues ticking and Susie eventually dated again. However, more than that, she's begun to plan for her future family. Freezing her eggs. Susie, who is 32 years old, has already talked about how she would be freezing her eggs. Right now, they are healthy, and she's young enough. It makes sense to preserve them so she can use them later if she needs to. However, according to US Weekly, it ended up being a harder emotional experience than she expected. Why? Her sister called to shave her head as she has cancer. When I started my injections, I knew I was going to vlog the process, but I was coming off of a really tough week, Susie reveals. I was super emotional. My little sister was diagnosed with cancer last year, and earlier that week, she FaceTimed me when she had shaved her head from chemo. That's not all. She was also struggling with anxiety about who she is as a person. Being a long-distance daughter and sister is never easy, so she was really doubting herself. I was battling with this anxiety of, am I a good enough sister? Am I a good enough daughter? I was feeling guilt for living so far away, she confesses. All of these overwhelming thoughts and feelings were creeping into my head. What am I doing with my life? Should I be in LA? Am I doing the right thing? Am I ever going to find somebody here? I was just dealing with so much stuff. Did you know Susie Evans was freezing her eggs? Come back to TV, shows Ace for more updates on all of your favorite Bachelor Nation alumni. Susie Evans details emotional egg freezing journey. I felt fear, sadness, and immense gratitude. Bachelor Nation star Susie Evans is opening up about a deeply personal chapter of her life. And this time, the reality TV personality is taking fans behind the scenes of her decision to freeze her eggs. The former Bachelor contestant has never been afraid to share vulnerable moments with her followers, but her fertility journey has brought a different level of emotion. In May 2026, Evans began documenting the process on social media, revealing that starting hormone injections left her feeling a complicated mix of fear, sadness, and gratitude. For Evans, the decision wasn't simply about a medical procedure. It forced her to reflect on where she is in life, where she hoped she would be by now, and what she still wants for her future. A decision filled with emotion. Evans revealed that she officially began hormone injections in preparation for her egg retrieval, which was expected to take place roughly 2 weeks later. Rather than pretending the experience was easy, she admitted that her first day of medication was surprisingly emotional. She described experiencing fear, sadness, and immense gratitude all at once. That emotional reaction appeared to surprise even Evans herself. She explained that she had deliberately packed her schedule before beginning treatment because she knew the process would require her to slow down. Once the injections began, however, she found herself confronting feelings she had been keeping busy enough to avoid. Evans reflected on everything that had brought her to that moment and acknowledged that she can sometimes be hard on herself when she feels she hasn't figured out certain parts of her life. But alongside the sadness came something else, pride. She reminded herself that her life doesn't have to follow a predetermined timeline to be meaningful. "I've come so far," was the message behind her reflection, as she considered the experiences she has already had and the person she has become. "I haven't figured everything out." One of the most relatable aspects of Evan's story is her honesty about feeling behind. The reality star has experienced plenty of major milestones. She has traveled, lived abroad, pursued pageantry, and appeared on reality television. Yet, despite those accomplishments, she admitted that she sometimes becomes discouraged because certain personal chapters haven't unfolded exactly as she imagined. Her fertility journey gave her an opportunity to look at her life from another perspective. Instead of viewing the decision as proof that something was missing, Evans began to see egg freezing as an opportunity to give herself more choices. She explained that she is still figuring out the marriage and children chapter of her life. Rather than rushing into a relationship or family decision simply because of expectations, she chose to be proactive about preserving an option for the future. That distinction is important. Egg freezing doesn't guarantee a future pregnancy. But for Evans, the process represented a way of taking some control over an area of life that can otherwise feel unpredictable. Choosing herself. Evans had previously discussed the decision before beginning the injections, explaining that the experience had encouraged her to focus more intentionally on herself. That theme became central to her journey. She wasn't necessarily saying that she had abandoned her hopes of finding love or starting a family. Instead, she was making space for herself while those questions remained unanswered. For someone whose romantic life has been publicly discussed throughout her time in Bachelor Nation, that decision carries particular weight. Fans first became familiar with Evans during Clayton Echard's season of The Bachelor, and she later appeared on Bachelor in Paradise. Her relationships and breakups have played out under the scrutiny that comes with reality television. But freezing her eggs gave Evans a chance to make a major personal decision without waiting for someone else to determine the timing of her future. The journey wasn't just emotional. As Evans continued documenting the process, she offered followers glimpses into the physical side of egg freezing. During the hormone injection period, she experienced bloating and some bruising. Despite those side effects, she described the overall experience as surprisingly manageable. She even developed an unexpectedly tender connection with the follicles growing during the process. Evans joked that she was talking to them and telling them how much she loved them, just in case they eventually became her future children. That moment perfectly captured the emotional complexity of the experience. There was science involved, medication and medical monitoring, but there was also hope. For Evans, those tiny developing follicles represented a possibility she wasn't willing to take for granted. Why Chicago mattered. Evans also revealed that she chose to undergo the process in Chicago. One of the factors that mattered to her was long-term cryopreservation storage. She explained that she wanted her eggs to remain on site at the laboratory rather than being transferred to a third-party facility. She also described the location as important because of its reproductive health environment. Ultimately, she said the goal was to take control of her fertility and be proactive about what she wanted. That sense of control became one of the biggest themes of her story. The emotional egg retrieval. After weeks of injections and preparation, Evans eventually underwent the egg retrieval procedure. She later shared an emotional video from the recovery room, visibly crying after the procedure. Fortunately, she reported that the retrieval went well. Evans explained that she tends to become particularly emotional after anesthesia and admitted that she simply wanted to hug everyone around her. The emotional reaction wasn't necessarily a sign that something had gone wrong. Instead, it seemed to be the culmination of everything she had experienced during the weeks leading up to the procedure. She had spent days injecting hormones, monitoring her body, thinking about motherhood, and confronting complicated feelings about her future. When the procedure was finally over, all of those emotions appeared to come rushing out. She was careful with her health. Evans also answered questions from followers about how she prepared for the procedure. During the injection period, she said she did not drink alcohol. She also explained that she had limited alcohol consumption during the month before starting injections because she wanted to be as healthy as possible going into the process. Her willingness to discuss these details gave followers a more realistic look at what fertility preservation can involve. Rather than presenting the experience as glamorous or effortless, Evans showed the uncertainty, physical discomfort, and emotional ups and downs that came with it. A larger conversation about fertility. Evans' decision comes as more women in the public eye speak openly about egg freezing and fertility preservation. Egg freezing, formerly known as oocyte cryopreservation, involves retrieving eggs and freezing them for possible future use. However, it is important to remember that freezing eggs does not guarantee a future birth. Outcomes can vary based on factors including age, the number of eggs retrieved, and individual medical circumstances. Research has also found that women can experience significant emotional challenges during the process, including feelings of isolation and uncertainty. That makes Evans' openness particularly meaningful. She isn't presenting herself as someone who has all the answers. In fact, the opposite is true. Her message is essentially that it's okay not to have everything figured out. I'm still figuring it out. Perhaps the most powerful part of Evans' story is that she hasn't pretended egg freezing magically solved every question about her future. She is still figuring things out. She still hopes for love. She still has thoughts about marriage and children. And she still doesn't know exactly what the next chapter will look like. What she has done is create another option for herself. For fans who have followed her journey from reality television to life outside the franchise, the egg freezing experience represents another example of Evans choosing vulnerability over perfection. She could have kept the process private. Instead, she allowed followers to see the injections, the tears, the uncertainty, and eventually the relief. And perhaps that's why her story has resonated so strongly. Susie Evans isn't claiming to have life perfectly mapped out. She's showing that sometimes taking control means admitting that you don't know what comes